Kumasi Ayobe, would address you this morning on two important issues. Honour Minister.
Pius, thank you. Colleagues, good morning and welcome. This morning there are two issues that we want to address. One is the government's position and next steps reference the threatened ban by FIFA. And the second is, again, the government's position and next steps on the inherited challenges in the financial services sector that need to be cleaned up. So let's start with football, since we're a football-loving nation. It will be recalled that in a letter dated 13th of August 2018, the Federation of International Football Associations, or FIFA, notified the government of Ghana that it disagrees with the second phase of GOG's efforts to resolve the recent challenges with football administration in Ghana. The Bureau of the Council of FIFA, after considering Ghana's preferred route to curing the problem of widespread corruption, considers that the petition before the courts currently, which is to liquidate the GFA, will be an act which in their opinion amounts to undue influence in the affairs of the GFA, and that will be contrary to Articles 14 and 19 of their statutes. Upon receiving this communication, the government of Ghana and FIFA have continued to engage. You'll recall that we started engagements with them right from the onset. We have continued to engage even at the highest levels. And the two parties, that's the government of Ghana and FIFA, have agreed to meet on Thursday, August 16, 2018, at the FIFA headquarters to discuss a number of issues. The focus of that discussion is to explore means by which the two parties, that's the government of Ghana and FIFA, can finalize arrangements on a mutually acceptable route for this final phase of resolving the observed infractions in football administration in Ghana. So a quick background. You'll recall that in a documentary that was aired on the 7th of June 2018, titled Number 12, When Greed and Corruption Become the Norm, some officials of the FA and administrators of football were caught on camera in an expose of widespread corruption, bribery, match fixing, and other forms of illegality. The GOG and FIFA were jointly of the view that the above listed infractions should be dealt with. On GOG's part, the first phase was securing a court injunction to set aside the executive of the FA. On FIFA's part, they also, among other things, temporarily banned the FA president. Then the two parties came together after we started engagement and set up a liaison committee which was to take over the management of some aspects of Ghana football, or the administration of Ghana football, pending a final and permanent resolution of the matter. Now, the government of Ghana, in its commitment to solve the problem permanently, believes that the FA as constituted currently is not fit for purpose because of the actions of the leadership and some members, and has consequently applied to the court to liquidate the FA altogether. The expectation is that a new body will be constituted after the liquidation to administer football moving forward. FIFA also agrees that a substantive solution must be found, but does not believe that it should be by liquidation of the GFA altogether. Indeed, both parties have taken the first joint step, as I mentioned, in setting up the liaison team led by Dr. Kofi Amoah to carry out some aspects of football administration. FIFA, in their earlier meetings with us, reaffirmed their commitment to zero tolerance for corruption in football, and they also expressed their commitment that they have no problem with Ghana enforcing our domestic laws generally. Now, what the two parties are currently not agreed on is the final route to take in solving the problem permanently. Whether we should go by liquidation or we should go by another route which achieves the same objective but does not end up in a position considered by FIFA as a breach of their statutes. For the avoidance of doubt, the government of Ghana does not share that position that FIFA puts out, but we are continuing to engage with them because we believe that we can still find a common ground to achieve the same objective. That is what this latest round of meetings that are slated for Thursday is supposed to conclude on. The government of Ghana assures the Ghanaian public and all stakeholders in football that it remains resolute in its efforts to clean up the unethical and criminal acts reported in Ghana football and will not renege on all legal routes to achieve this objective. So reference to the letter that you have seen from FIFA and the response that you have seen, I think, circulated earlier this morning. This is the position of the government of Ghana. I'll take questions on it shortly, but I want to deal with the second matter and then I'll take questions on this. The second matter is where we are now on the resolution of the challenges inherited in the financial services sector. Again, the government of Ghana, under the leadership of President Akufo-Addo, reiterates to all stakeholders its firm commitment to dealing with the challenges it inherited in Ghana's financial services sector decisively and within the shortest possible time. Between 2013 and 2016, a number of occurrences took place which have culminated into what could have led to a collapse of Ghana's financial services sector. Over the last 18 months or so, the Akufo-Addo administration, working with the new leadership of the regulators in the various parts of the financial services sector, has commenced a series of exercises. And the exercises are aimed at achieving about 4 major things. 1, to clean up the inherited challenges. 2, to introduce mechanisms that should forestall a repetition of such challenges in the future. 3, to hold accountable persons involved in unethical and sometimes criminal conduct within the sector. And 4, to strengthen the financial services sector so that we can engender confidence in it and enable it to perform optimally in the near future. Now, the above mentioned objectives are being achieved simultaneously, and it's being done in strict compliance with the legal and international best practices that are known to us. The administration, therefore, assures shareholders, depositors, and the general public, and all other economic actors that the new leadership across the financial services regulatory sector, as well as the Ministry of Finance, are doing all that is within their power to ensure the full, firm, and final resolution of the challenges that bedeviled the sector. The administration is fully committed to go full throttle and to clean up the sector once and for all. It may be something that will take a bit of time. It will be a difficult and expensive process. Of course, the cleanup is not over yet, but the administration commits that it will be done. Again, let me give you a bit of background and a few specifics. The challenges that many of you are reporting through some of the reports that you have chanced upon are part of the legacy problems in the broader financial services sector, which the Akufo-Addo administration inherited in January 2017. Indeed, you recall that prior to then, the vice presidential candidate, Dr. Bawumia, in some of his lectures in campaign 2016, mentioned the distressed financial services sector and the need for the government of the day to tackle it head-on. Upon assumption of office, the new administration appointed new heads of the regulatory agencies and has given them full backing and resources to address these distressed positions fully. A comprehensive roadmap was developed and is being implemented currently to tackle the various levels of the challenges. Now, all distressed institutions, starting with the banks, were initially put on a recovery plan, and it had timelines attached to it. The general industry was also asked to recapitalize, as I'm sure you are aware, as part of efforts to improve their robustness. Standards for improved corporate governance were also introduced to forestall repetitions even after the cleanup. And the government has been willing to step in to provide temporary relief to protect particularly depositors where necessary, and at the same time to use the legal means at its disposal to retrieve and where necessary punish wrongdoers. All this is necessary to bring about change in the financial services sector and to put the sector on a firm footing to play its role in the economy. As you know, the sector is what stores our wealth, it lends to businesses, it creates credit with a huge multiplier effect for economic activity. So far, the resolution is taking place First, in the banking sector, government fully endorses the actions of the central bank and has demonstrated that government backs the central bank in doing this. For the initial two banks, 2.2 billion Ghana cedis was made available to plug the hole so that depositors' funds were protected. For the 5 banks that were consolidated, 5.7 billion cedis was used for the same purpose to plug the hole. And then an additional 450 million Ghana cedis was used to capitalize the new bank, Consolidated Bank. Government believes that the regulator should be supported to clean up the system and to restore confidence. Of course, it's an ongoing process which has not ended. The administration gives the regulators a full backing to do the needful every step of the way. Government will do the same in the other subsectors as the regulators progress with the cleanup there too. Now, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not sanctions will be brought to bear for persons who've been involved in criminal conduct. And yesterday you heard the Minister for Finance state categorically that for persons who are involved or found to have been involved in criminal conduct or illegal conduct, sanctions will be brought to bear. Of course, you are aware that the challenges in the sector come in various types. There were those who had normal challenges with their own recoveries. There were those who literally went in to take depositors' money, etc. So for those who have been found culpable, sanctions will be brought to bear. The Finance Ministry and the Bank of Ghana have already committed to this, as I've mentioned, so I won't belabor that point. Now, I want to briefly talk about the fiscal implications of this about 7.9 billion that we have had to pump in to hold the fort and to save the situation currently. 2.2, as I mentioned, for the first 2 banks, 5.7 in the second instance. That alone is about 7.9 that has been put in. This is in addition to the other 450 million used to capitalize Consolidated Bank. This obviously is money that was not budgeted to be utilized for this purpose. Indeed, this year, if you look at our total capital expenditure budget, all of us talking about infrastructure and the need to expand infrastructure in this country, our total capital expenditure budget for this year is about 6.2. Compare that to about 7.9 that we've had to spend or we've had to use to plug this. It gives you a fair idea of the size of the challenge that we are trying to tackle. The big deal is the opportunity cost. This is monies that we have to, or we have planned to use for other purposes, and we're having to use to hold this fort currently. We'll therefore, as we get ready for budget 2019, have to come to terms with the full fiscal implications and how to ensure that the agenda is not compromised because of this legacy issue that we've had to deal with. Also, this comes at a time when the new administration has committed that we're going to bring the deficit down to about 4.5% this year as we prepare to exit the IMF program by the end of this year. And of course, we're having to spend or literally borrow this extra to plug the hole. So it gives you a fair idea of the fiscal implications that we're having to contend with. Let me deal with politicization. There are some who seek to reduce everything in this country to partisan politics. Indeed, in recent weeks, I'm sure that you have heard some political actors claiming that the cleanup is politically motivated and that it is ill-driven, or it's an attempt to rather collapse the system. This is blatantly ill-informed. This is rather the time to tone down and soberly reflect and come to terms with the nature of the challenge and the efforts that the new administration is making to resolve it. Indeed, if we want to be partisan with it, then the current administration will rather be the one with the moral high ground to question members and assigns of the previous administration on what they did all of these years as the situation deteriorated further. But our focus is to govern and to deliver change in all areas, including the financial services sector. And so we'll stick to that, and we'll leave the partisanship for another day. The way forward is that the administration believes that we should have a strong financial services sector, especially also having strong indigenous Ghanaian banks. And this is demonstrated in how we've assisted local banks, sometimes with debt, sometimes with equity, so that they can hold or assume, I think the technical word in this one, the purchase and assumption transactions, is to assume the struggling indigenous banks. And the commitment remains that we shall endeavor to live up to it. Local banks that are solvent and are functioning, that are also working towards meeting their capital requirements, will also get the necessary encouragement and direction from both the regulators and government so that they also become strong indigenous banks. If it's about encouraging them to merge on their own to achieve that purpose, guidelines are being put out and that will be done. If it's some other sort of support that needs to be given to them, that will also be embarked upon. Now, one final question is what the Bank of Ghana is also doing to ensure, or what government is doing to ensure that the regulators don't slip. I'm pleased to inform you that an Office of Ethics and Internal Investigations has been set up at the Bank of Ghana to commence a first line of interrogation of their own systems and procedures and persons who may have been culpable in this exercise. And it is expected that persons, again, who are found culpable in that area will be dealt with. And then most importantly, these infractions do not continue. So colleagues, this morning, simply put, these are the two major positions of the government of Ghana on these two matters. I will take your questions and respond to them as well. Can we turn off the air conditioner? It's a bit cold here, isn't it? The objective of government is to have a robust, well-regulated, well-performing financial services sector. That's the objective. If in our bid to achieve that, some persons are found culpable of criminal conduct, as I've mentioned, and as the finance minister has mentioned, the governor has mentioned, those persons will be dealt with. Criminality needs to be dealt with separately from the big objective, which is to ensure that we have a robust, well-performing, well-regulated financial services sector. It is true that it's been about a year since the Bank of Ghana and its advisors completed their primary investigations and made it available to IOCO and some of the other investigative and prosecutorial agencies. I do know that soon they will now take things to the next level. Prosecutorial action against persons found culpable should be commencing soon. What you should also, what all of us should also bear in mind is that we have a history in this country where agencies conduct their investigation, present it to the prosecutorial agencies, and sometimes the courts have shut it down because the prosecutorial agencies did not do their own work and come up with their own dockets. So it's important that that is also done properly so that nobody goes to court to go and falter. So the commitment is clear, the process is being followed, the wheels will grind in due course.
No attempt to retrieve any money?
As I've mentioned, for those who are involved in criminal action, there's a part for them. Receivers have been appointed for these organizations. The job of the receiver is to retrieve, may I say, assets of these organizations that are incumbent, or assets that are not available to the organization, and therefore the receivers are handling that aspect as well. Thank you. The Minister for Sports, the Deputy Attorney General, and a Deputy Chief of Staff will be leading that delegation to FIFA headquarters. The delegation need not be different from the initial delegation that has been doing these engagements, because there's already a series of discussions and some things that have been agreed on. So that delegation need not be different. Indeed, if you go back to some of the earlier points that were made when the delegation started its work, it was mentioned that the initial conversation on a roadmap to the resolution ought to be discussed with the Bureau of the Council of FIFA. So the measures that were put in were temporary measures, the liaison committee, etc. It is the Bureau that, now having considered this, has come out that they don't agree with a particular step in the second phase. And that is why they're having to engage to tidy that one up. And then we can all have clarity on this way forward. Of course, reforming Ghana football is something that FIFA will have an interest in, but the people of Ghana also have an interest in, and therefore it's important for both parties to collaborate and ensure that it happens. I do not have a brief currently on the status of the investigations that are going on with Mr. Nyantichi, etc. I will fetch that for you, hopefully, for our next briefing. I'm not sure we'll finish this matter exactly today, but I'll fetch that for you for our next briefing. These briefings are going to be regular on various topics, so I'll fetch that for you for our next briefing. Thank you.
You didn't address the roadmap issue. If there was a roadmap presented on what the football will look like when it's done.
I did. And my point is that in that conversation with FIFA, the roadmap, as was being discussed, needed to be referred to the Bureau of the Council. It is that has been fed back to us, that a particular step in it is one they are not comfortable with. And that is why there's a need to re-engage so that we can have that clarity moving forward. TK? Feedback on where we are in terms of, there's a liaison committee. You'll notice that they even wrote the letter to the liaison committee. The liaison committee feeds back to them on where we are, reference to the aspects of Ghana football that we are moving on. The investigations that are being conducted by the state security apparatus, if they are looking for specifics on it, will be cleared when this meeting takes place. But we are in engagement with FIFA. They know where we agreed to pursue this too, i.e. going through this particular route. And now their bureau tells us that that particular route is one that they are not comfortable with. And therefore, it's important to engage with them and see how we can clear it up forward. But the important thing is that we are committed as a government to doing it. We will follow all legal processes to ensure that it is done. We acknowledge that FIFA are stakeholders, and we'll engage with them and not renege on the commitment at the end of the day. In principle, we don't think that FIFA disagrees with us on the big picture. It is the route that they want us to align on, and we'll be more than willing to engage with them to see if we can achieve common ground on that one. TK?
Jobs. I mean, unless you want to affirm to us that there would be no job losses, which a lot of people believe cannot be the situation. So we want to find out really what's the plan with job losses. Is it that we'll just be insensitive for it? And again, finally, did any of the institutions, did any of the banks come up with a recapitalization plan that, oh, this is how we would want to recapitalize? If you say I owe, I would want to inject this amount of money in.
Thank you, TK. So, for the avoidance of doubt, we empathize with all who are unduly affected by the challenges of the sector in themselves and the efforts to resolve those challenges. You describe it as government is cracking the whip, and that's leading to job losses. I don't think that's a fair description. Government is rather solving the challenges of these institutions. Indeed, if you speak to many of the persons in these institutions, they themselves were very clear the challenges they were having prior to the regulators' action to allow bigger banks to assume them and protect their depositors. Now, these are purchase and assumption transactions that have been done. What it means is that the new organization that has assumed these struggling organizations, in the case of Ghana Commercial Bank or in the case of Consolidated Bank, now has to examine their staff numbers, has to examine, for example, whether or not it's appropriate to have 3 different branches of their new bank on the same, let's say, street, sometimes back to back. So they have to do their own rationalization and as much as possible ensure that job losses are curtailed to the barest minimum. Now, your other question is about whether or not these organizations submitted recapitalization plans. As I mentioned, the roadmap that was developed from about April 2017, when the new regulators of the central bank took over, is a roadmap that allowed many of these organizations to submit recapitalization plans. But these plans have timelines because they cannot be in perpetuity. So as the time goes on and those timelines, if they are not met, indeed there are other organizations that have been able to meet some of their timelines, and you notice that they have not been affected. But it cannot go on in perpetuity, and that's why the bank at a point had to step in and allow a bigger bank to assume them, because the bank also couldn't keep pumping emergency liquidity assistance into it when the recap plans were not materializing and depositors were at risk. And so, yes, I believe that many of them submitted those plans, but the timelines were also on the table. The bank made a decision at a point in time. For those who disagree with the decision of the bank, I'm sure there are avenues to contest that. But the bank has acted in this manner, and the government gives the bank its full backing to ensure that the sector is cleaned up and cleaned up substantially. Yes, sir.
My question relates to executive committee members of the about to be liquidated GFA. Some of them have reported concerns in traveling outside the country. Have any of the executive committee members been banned from leaving this country?
I'm not aware of that.
You are not aware of that?
No, I'm not aware of that. Thank you. Next question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, another one. There's been this question about Ghana being a sovereign country and
Yes.
not kowtow to the rules of FIFA.
Yes.
The FIFA insists that what they want must be done with government, with one court case.
Ghana is a sovereign country that has its laws. We have explained that to FIFA right from our very initial meetings, and FIFA themselves expressed that they don't have a problem with Ghana enforcing its municipal laws. Now, what they have, and if you read through the fine print of their document, what they have said is that the route for the second phase, which is the liquidation route, is what they will interpret as an interference. They have not said that they are not interested in solving the problem once and for all. So both of us have the same objective. It is important that as we have engaged with them so far, even to set up a liaison committee and to get to this point, we further engage with them on how to arrive at that solution without necessarily encountering an infringement of Article 14 or Article 19. But that ought not to be interpreted in any way that Ghana will be willing to throw away its sovereignty through the window just because FIFA has threatened. No. We believe that the two of us can come to a common goal. FIFA's objective and our objective appears to be the same. And we believe that by re-engaging, we can come to that common point. But our sovereignty, our clarity to deal with the matters that we have witnessed are things that we will not compromise on. Any other questions? And then we'll wrap up. I know you have many other assignments to attend to.
Yes, I'll ask my question. I mean, sometime last month, the local banks presented